Hello, how you doing? I'm Craig Parkinson. You are listening to the Two Shot Podcast. Sit yourself down, pop the kettle on. We're going to have a nice old chat. Who's it with this week? I'm going to tell you right now. How the devil are you? It's Thursday. It's the podcast. It's the Two Shot Podcast. I'm Craig Parkinson, and you're you, and you're here. Thank you so much for downloading and subscribing. It really means the world. So, this is episode 46, and it's a good one. You know what it is. Are you ready? It's Mr. Adrian Dunbar. I know. It's exciting, right? So, the thing is, since I started it, AD was always on my list, and I know that listeners have always said, when are you getting Adrian Dunbar on? So let me tell you, when I first started the podcast, I emailed a few people. AD was one of them, and I emailed AD. I said, look, I'd love you to come on this podcast that I'm starting, and we can have a natter, and it'd be really great. And I didn't hear anything. So I worried and go, oh God, he's not into it. And then he hasn't replied to me. That's not like him. And then, excuse me, I bumped into him in London with a few other friends. And he mentioned about the podcast because it was already up and running by then. I said, oh, did you not get my email? And he said, what? I said, well, I want you to come on. He said, I think he didn't get the email, everyone. So we sorted it out. We met in London. It was a beautiful sunny day. It was just before the BAFTA Awards, which he was quite rightly nominated for. And we met in Maison Bertaux. We went down to the basement and we hit record. And this is it. I think you're going to really love it. This is episode 46 of the Two Shot Podcast with the fantastic Adrian Dunbar. Enjoy, and I'll see you at the end. You're looking very well, I must say.
Thanks, mate. Trying my best, you know.
So this has been a long time coming. Adrian Dunbar on the podcast. Because when I first started, obviously, you were on my list.
Yeah.
And then I emailed you, and then I didn't hear from you. I thought, oh my God, what have I done? I've upset Adrian.
No,
You don't want to come on. And obviously it just got lost, but now you're here.
I'm here. Great.
And I want to kick off. I don't really talk about jobs like loads that much because it can be a bit boring, but I have to say congratulations for the BAFTA nomination.
Thank you very much, Craig. I'm delighted.
We're all very proud.
Yeah, I'm delighted. And I'm delighted the show's got so much, a lot of attention this year. I think it's got about 4 or 5 nominations, which is great. And we've been kind of waiting on that, you know, for a while. Yeah,
it's been a long time coming, I think. Someone's having a sneezing fit upstairs. Don't let that put you off. Enniskillen, tell me about growing up there. Right, we had a brief pause there, but we can always pick it back up.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to the start in Enniskillen, which is that's where you were born, right? Yeah,
I was born in Enniskillen. Beautiful town. Fabulous, beautiful island town. It was a great place to grow up as a kid, you know. A lot of fishing on the boats, on the lake. And it was a nice town because it was Northern Ireland. It was very mixed. It was, lived in a housing estate that was mixed, Catholic and Protestant. And, you know, there didn't seem to be any trouble at that point with what was happening. But that's only because probably I was a kid and I didn't really notice any of that stuff. But there was agitation going on, obviously. But for a kid growing up there, it was amazing. We had, you know, all the swimming and our mates, and we could get out into the country, and the coast was close in the summer, and it really was a kind of a halcyon place to grow up.
A large family as well.
I mean, a big family. I had 4 sisters and 2 brothers. And, you know, so plenty of interaction, plenty of fun.
Happy household, lady.
Yeah. No, everything was all right. You know, very poor, but you know, nobody had any money, so you know, you didn't really notice any of that. And you know, my father was a carpenter, and my mother went out to work, and you know, we fitted into we had our community, and it was lovely people around us, and uncles and aunties, and it was great. Yeah, really good.
Did Dad enjoy his work as a carpenter?
He did, and he came from a place called Portadown in County Armagh, and his family were nearly 5 generations of carpenters. So we've traced that back. So carpentry and working with wood was always in the family, except of course when it came to me. And I can remember my mother and my Auntie Evelyn standing at the kind of the door, the kitchen door of our old house in Castle Street, and my brother John was sort of happily knocking up a kind of medieval castle out of wood or something like that, and I was, when he was about 8, and they were kind of looking at me and they were saying, "Oh God, what's going to happen to that child there, because he has no hands." That's how they used to say, he had no hands. Not that I knew what that meant at the time, but basically they were saying, how's he going to learn a trade if he can't, hold a saw or,
a chisel
or whatever. But anyway, that was it. And my father was a carpenter, and he then became a foreman on sites. He worked for a lot of the bigger companies like Langs and people like that. He was great shutter joiner, which means building shapes, wooden shapes for pouring concrete into. And in fact, he worked on any of the bridges that were happening around the county, and the main bridge, the last bridge that was built in Enniskillen, he worked on. He was a foreman on that. And so he died when he was about 50. So that's the biggest thing that happened to our family. The fact, when a parent dies, that's it, isn't it? I mean, for every family, when a parent dies, that's the biggest thing that happens. So I was at drama school at that point, and I was 21, I think. So it was really, really difficult for my sisters, of course, my younger sisters in particular, and of course with my mother. But she had to pick things up, I suppose, and just, keep going. There was nothing for it. But I suppose going back, school was all right. I had a good time at school. I wasn't really any good at exams or anything like that. I somehow, when it came to doing exams, not that I froze, it's just that I found it very difficult to understand the questions a lot of the time. It was a very strange thing. I don't know whether it was kind of a dyslexic thing or not, but I always found it difficult to understand what it was exactly they were asking me.
Are you dyslexic, AD?
I don't think, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I don't have any problem, but somehow the questions always seemed to kind of think, well, what angle are they coming from on this? What is it they want from me? Anyway, it was a confusion that lasted kind of most of my life, and so I didn't go to the grammar school. I went to the secondary school, and at one point then, about 1969, we decided, because of work really from my father, we moved to Portadown, back to his hometown.
Right.
Which was probably a really bad decision, because at that point, of course, Bloody Sunday happened and Derry happened, and Portadown, unlike Enniskillen, wasn't a liberal type of town. The Catholics then were forced into a sort of ghetto in the northwest corner of the town, a place called the Tunnel and the Gervahi Road and Drumcree, and which later on became quite famous. But through the early 70s, it was a very dangerous kind of place to be, and there's a lot of rioting and a lot of, there was a lot of action in the streets and a lot of violence. So we kind of suffered that for a while, and there were times, where we'd have to be bundled into the car late at night and kind of brought back to Enniskillen because things were getting too rough. But after that, we got back to Enniskillen. That was like being let out of jail, really, because we were back somewhere that, you could walk up the main street of the town, and, you weren't afraid that somebody was going to kind of pick on you because of the school uniform you were wearing.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of sectarianism in Portadown. So Enniskillen was great. we were back there, and, you know, it was there that I got into music. I started getting into...
Oh, it was music first, was it?
Yeah, it was music first, you know, playing in bands and stuff. I started a little 3-piece country band with 2 mates of mine. And we'd travel around to these little kind of pubs and lounges, and we were a bit of a novelty because we were only like 16 or 17.
What were you playing?
I was playing bass guitar and singing. We had drums and rhythm. My mate Finton was on rhythm and Tony was on the drums. Tony's brother Christy drove us about. We were called the Breeze, you know. You know, at least we weren't a rock band called Glad Stallion or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyway, so there we were, and I was doing that. And while I was doing that, then one day I was stopped by this little guy called Vincent Dunnigan, and he said to me, "Are you free tonight to play?" Because he knew I played bass guitar. So I said, yeah, okay. And it was a guy called Frank Chisholm, who was an Elvis Presley impersonator, who had a proper big grown-up band. And so I kind of joined this cabaret outfit, which was kind of a step up to another level, playing bigger places and that. But, you know, I really wasn't up to it musically, and had to kind of learn really quickly on the hoof how to play lots of these different runs and riffs. And I was so bad, I think, the first night that the lead guitarist left the band. But it was, I stuck with it. And at the same time as doing that, and kind of not really concentrating on school at all, because I thought, you know, this is going to be great. I'm going to have a career. I'm going to be doing something in music. And I'd left school then, and I had this job in the abattoir, which paid really good money.
What were you doing in the abattoir?
Well, you know, it was an abattoir that killed pigs. So I was 2 years there, all told, and within the second year, I was playing with the band as well. And so I was earning about 85 quid a week, which was a really lot of money at the time, 78 or whatever it was, in the factory, you know, where they killed about 300 or 400 pigs a day. And then I was going out 2 or 3 nights a week and playing with the band, and I was getting £25 a night. So I was earning, you know, for the time, I was earning a lot of money. I was earning actually nearly as much money, if not more, than my dad, you know, and I was kind of giving money over to the house and so forth. So anyhow, whilst we went to the States, you know, with this guy. We played in the Bronx in 1979.
Did you? How was that?
Yeah, that was absolutely nuts. I mean, you know, there was all kinds of stuff. I mean, New York in 1979 was an extremely dangerous place. When I go back to New York now and I'm talking to people and I say, yeah, I was here in the summer of 1979, they all kind of, their jaws drop and they go, my God, where were you? And I say, well, I was on the Fordham Road in the Bronx, and then their jaws dropped further, you know.
God.
Because it literally was, you know, extremely dangerous. Rather like, sadly, London is getting at the moment, where there's a lot of random acts of violence happening on the street.
Yeah.
But one of the things that happened to me was, when I was there, was, you know, the guys, they were very happy hanging around the bars and kind of, you know, in the Bronx. But, of course, I wanted to get into... I wanted to go into New York. I wanted to see what was going on. And somebody told me that there were all these free... Dr. Pepper had these free concerts up in Central Park. So anyway, I went down to Central Park. And I was there one day. And this guy comes up to me. This, you know, a sort of... a black entrepreneur from Harlem approached me, shall we say. And he said... He said, you know, you're a tourist, right? And I went, yeah, that's right. He said, you want to earn some money? And I said, yeah, okay. He said, where are you from? I said, I'm from Ireland. He said, okay, Irish, you meet me here Wednesday night. He said, James Taylor is playing in the park. We're going to sell some T-shirts. I went, okay. So Wednesday night, I get down there. Whatever night it was, I was free because we were working quite a bit. I mean, it really was a tough gig. You know, you start at 9 o'clock and you finish at 3 a.m. That was the gig for the, you know, and 45-minute sets. So everybody was doing everything. But anyway, I showed up this night I thought, this is like, a real, will this happen or not? Anyway, this guy shows up with one of those huge mail bags.
Yeah.
He goes, okay, Irish, you take this mail bag, and we head into the park, and sure enough, there are all these thousands of kind of folkies, and they're all wearing kind of check shirts and osh-gosh, begosh dungarees, and they've got long hair, and, there's a lot of smell of various substances in the air, and all that's going on, and there's this guy jumps up on a rock in the middle of all these people and he goes, okay, Irish, hit me with a T-shirt. So I pull one of these T-shirts out of the bag and I throw it up to him and he rips off the plastic. He goes, okay, everybody, check it out. In Gothic print, on the front, shoot the fucking Bee Gees. On the back, disco sucks. Check it out. $1.50, Yeah, I'll have one of those. It was like that's all, what the hell's going on here? And so that was one of the experiences. I had many experiences. Some of them were scary as well. But it was an amazing time to be in New York because of all that. But on the radio every day there was more reports about rapes and murders and stabbings, and it really was a scary but a very vital place, of course. And it was a great experience in many respects. But when I got back then to Enniskillen from that particular trip, my cousin Imelda, who's sadly not with us anymore, she was involved, and there was always a big amateur dramatic, scene in all the Irish towns, all the small Irish towns. You probably know yourself, Craig. And so there was a big amateur scene, and my cousin was involved with the St. Michael's Amateur Dramatic Society, and she asked me would I come along and give them a hand with a guy called Marty Quinn, a hand with the lights, because they were going to Ballyshannon for a festival. So they were doing this incredibly crazy American play called, what was it called? The Effect of Gamma Rays in Man... No, The Effect of Gamma Rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds.
It's a good title.
It's a fantastic title, and it's actually a really extraordinary American play about... it's monologues about these women. I must dig it out, actually. Anyway, I went and I said my cousin was in it and a friend of ours was in it. And I helped Marty with the lights, and and I really liked the people. They all seem to be from all kind of different places and all different ages, and yet they all seem to be kind of hanging around this one thing and this amateur, this love, which is what amateur means, the love of something, the love of the theatre. And I kind of liked them, and they had a sense of humour, and they were funny, and they were kind. And I thought, oh, this isn't interesting. And I remember years later reading a thing that Kurt Vonnegut said about that all of us are born into one family, but ultimately we're looking for another family that we belong to. And some of us are kind of lucky if we find it. And I kind of had got a sniff at that point that maybe this is the family that I really belong to, maybe the music. Anyway, a lot of people, the next thing was next year they had another play and there was a part, and they offered me to play this part. And I said, yeah, of course, at that age you don't think about stuff, and, you learn your speech and all the rest of it, and then you do it, and as you're doing it in front of audiences, you start to get a feel of what that kind of performance thing is like. And, afterwards, people say, you really could think about, maybe auditioning for a drama school, which was, completely off the wall as far as I was concerned. But anyway, I was still playing with the band, but... Lucky for me, there were a couple of people there who really thought that I should do it, and they got me a form and they helped me fill it out and they sent it off, and they got me this audition in London for the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, which I'd never heard of. And but there were a very kind old couple in the town called Pat and Neville Fleming, and their son had gone to the Guildhall, and they were always talking about the Guildhall. And we sent it off. I got this audition. I went to the guys in the band. And, of course, like being bands and all that. Well, if you're going off to London, you're going to do this and you're going to, I don't know whether we're able to keep your place in the band. And I went, oh, God, all right then. So off I went, knowing that I hadn't got my job in the band when I came back. And I went and I did this, the first kind of, it was a crazy time because a film called Fame had just come out. And like it looked like everybody and his granny wanted to be in drama school because there was thousands of people show. I mean, there was thousands, literally thousands of people. Anyway, you know, they were taking like 60 people at a time and rushing them through things, and you'd get through that bit, and then, you know, it was a one-day thing where they went, you know, and then I had to find somewhere to stay because I hadn't really worked it out. So I got the Evening Standard, and I found myself going down to Russell Square, and I remember there was a guy standing smoking a cigarette at the door of this hotel down there, and this young French guy, and I thought, what's he doing, smoking a cigarette? You know, he's supposed to be greeting people at the door here. So I went in and said, you know, I'm come from that night porter's job. And they said, no, it's gone. I said, who's that fella out there? The one who's smoking a cigarette out there. And it was an old Irish woman, I remember, who was on the thing, and she went, yeah, you're right. Maurice. So she called him in, and she went, Maurice, look, I don't think we're going to need you tomorrow. And she said to me, look, don't worry about it. He's from an agency. He'll get another job tomorrow. Can you start? And I went, yeah, great. So I got myself the job.
Brilliant.
Had to hang around for a couple of weeks to find out, was I getting into the weekend bit, which was the final bit. Anyway, I get into the... I'm rattling away here, Craig. Is this all right?
Do you know what it is? I don't want to interrupt you because this is all absolutely brilliant.
Okay.
Please carry on.
I'll just rattle away.
No, it's fantastic, mate.
So I get into the weekend one, which is only 60 people, which is incredible out of all these thousands. So I'm there with 60 people, and they've got to get those 60 people down to 20. So, and we all know that. So the stress over the weekend is a nightmare. So we do, I mean, and I'm still doing the speech. That speech that I learned for that play is the thing that kind of got me through. It's from a play called The Scattering by a guy called Henno McGee, who only wrote one play.
Right.
And it was about set in Ireland in the 1950s. But anyway, so we do the first day. and then we do the second day, and there's less of us there. And on the second day, one of the third years, I think, says, oh, there's a party in Hackney tonight. Do any of you want to come? Now, you know, it wouldn't be a really good idea if you're doing a weekend trying to get into drama school to head off to a party on the Saturday night. But of course, I decided, and this other guy who was with me decided that we were both going to go to this party. Now, the other guy was he was younger than me, and he was a bit nuts, and his name was Neil, right? And, you know, so Neil Morrissey was his name. And so
never heard of him.
Never heard of him. So me and Neil headed off to this party. Somebody tried, we drank too much mulled wine. Somebody tried to kiss Neil. He nutted them. That made a huge thing happen. Then there was a very sweet but quite large girl who dragged Neil upstairs to a bedroom. I passed out under a load of coats and woke up with two people trying to, you know, do something on top of me about 6 hours later. Neil woke up, managed to get a shower. The two of us were in bits, but at least he woke me up, and the two of us headed off together for the last day. And we went through all the very fine... They got it down to singing, dancing. They got it down to kind of, you know, all kinds of very fine things eventually. And they decided... And then, guess what? They said, you've all got in. And we just all kind of went nuts. We must have lost about, you know, at least 3 or 4 pounds of weight over that weekend. It was so stressful, but the relief was so great. So therefore, I could go back to Enniskillen. I got myself a little summer job, which was amazing. And knowing that I was going to go to this incredible place, and it was 1980, and just had a drop of coffee there. It was that was 1970, end of 79, so it was 1980 when we were arriving, and you know, it was such a relief to get away from the stress of Northern Ireland for a start.
Yeah.
And then to arrive into the city of London was absolutely extraordinary. I mean, you know, here was somewhere where I'd known about all my life. I'd known quite a bit about, you know, the city itself. I was always interested in history. So to be dropped into the city of London was like kind of unbelievable. You know, the Barbican, being in the middle of the Barbican Centre, you know, you've got the Roman ruins, you've got London Wall, you've got Liverpool Street, you've got Spitalfields markets, you've got Gun Row, you've got all this kind of absolutely incredible stuff lying around. And we were all down in, I was living down in, I hadn't anywhere to stay when I arrived, of course. And, I had a couple of nights staying with somebody who I knew, I think. I can't quite sure. But very quickly, there was a guy who was in the second year who I immediately became friends with. I mean, everybody was really worried about me and him meeting because, his name was Charlie Lawson, and who, later, and, has gone on to be famous as Jim McDonald in Coronation Street. But Charlie was really kind to me because he decided to drop all his kind of posturing as a kind of, as a loyalist. And, he believes in that, and I have to respect him for his beliefs. But he was very kind to me, Charlie, and he had a room, and he was living with a guy called Spike, and he got me into the flat that he was staying in on the 19th floor down in the Isle of Dogs. So I lived in the Isle of Dogs for a while with Charlie, and that was great. And, kicked off in drama school that, first year with all these fabulous young people from all over the place, from Stoke and from Edinburgh and from Cardiff and from, in drama schools, it's a really good idea to get people from all over the place, so they can learn from one another, put an interesting class together,
Exactly.
And so we had people from everywhere, and it was really wonderful. And, we were all fit and young and healthy. And, I used to walk down the street with the girls and wonder why all these businessmen were staring at us. And then you realise that, the girls you were with were all so beautiful. And, it doesn't cross your mind sometimes until you get into a pub. And it was great. I think that first year at drama school was like one of the happiest years of my life, easily. And
did you bond very quickly all together?
Yeah, we bonded very quickly. Not all of us, of course. We didn't bond collectively. Of course, we bonded, and then we eventually kind of found out where our little kind of groups were, and that, and who we were going to. There was who we were going to hang out with. And then we started having girlfriends and boyfriends, and, people started pairing up, and, that kind of thing happened. And in the second year, I kind of, at the start of the second year, I was in a relationship, as such. I had a girlfriend called Annette Topol, who was the daughter of Hein Topol, who played Fiddler on the Roof in the film. And she was a lovely girl in that. I still see her. She lives in Los Angeles. She has 3 kids. And I when I go to Los Angeles, I still see Annette and hang out with her,
That's amazing that you've kept that connection.
Yeah, I've kept that, kept all those. I've kept loads of connections from that absolute period. There's 4 or 5 people I still see, including Neil and my friend Claire. And so, that was, but sadly though, it was in that year that my my father died, and I had to head back, and it was a very painful, difficult time. My brother John, who was working here in London in the post office, decided that he was going to go home, and I had to make a hard decision. Was I going to go home, try and earn some money at home, help the family, help my mother, etc., or was I going to stay? And I just thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to have to finish this course. I haven't come here. I haven't burnt my bridges with everybody. My father was so delighted and happy that I got into drama school. This is a chance for me to kind of, have a career rather than to drop. To stop it and go back and,
Yeah.
So I decided I was going to have to stay. And towards the end of that year, I got myself a job back in Belfast. They wanted in a new play by a writer called Graham Reid.
Was this after you graduated?
This is before.
Oh, before?
Before I graduated. The Guildhall had no problem in allowing you to go, because at those stages, of course, at those days, you had to have an equity card. And one of the hardest things to do is to get the equity card when you come out of drama school. So if one of the students got picked up for an ad, say, or even to do some pantomime, outside school time or even inside school time, if they were going to get an equity card out of it, the school quite wisely didn't stand in their way. So they allowed me to go and do, and I actually ended up doing 2 plays. I did a play in Belfast at the Lyric, which was very successful, and then I did another play off the back of that in the Tricycle. So it meant that I had missed a bit towards the end of and that meant that when I hit 3rd year, I was sort of out of the loop with the teachers and so forth. And at that time, coming in 3rd year, you're always looking to get parts.
Yeah.
Because, they're inviting people to come. And I didn't get any good parts because I was just out of the loop and I'd got my equity card, I'd done that. So the 3rd year was it was a bit difficult for me, the 3rd year, in that respect, because I came and did a couple of things, but it was like kind of winding down. I'd already got my equity card. The teachers would sort of say to me, "Oh, we're not worried about you. You're going to be okay." And in fact, you have to recognise at that time as well, Craig, there was a hell of a lot of really good writers in Ireland and in Northern Ireland. There was a lot of really good plays being done. There was a lot of really good. It was a good place to be from.
Yeah.
In the 1980s. And, I don't have to tell you, I'm sure Susan will confirm this. There was so much kind of stuff around that it was actually a good place to come from because of the body of work that was, and the body of good work that was coming out of there, more importantly.
Yeah.
So I very quickly, I went back to Belfast, where I knew there would be work for me. Where I sensed it. I didn't decide to stay in London because, I look around, there were just too many good young London actors,
Yeah.
And when you're young, you get cast a type. Nobody's going to take a chance on you to do something else. So
and you go where the work is.
You go where the work is. So you usually, wherever you're from, you head back.
Yeah.
And, because that's where you're going to get picked up and working and so forth. So back to Belfast, and I spent about, I suppose, a year or so there doing bits and pieces, bits of telly and bits of radio and play and an odd play. And then I did something on the telly that was quite good, and I wrote to an agent in London here who was just starting off, and he was working with an agency called Larry Dalzell. He was a guy called Michael Foster, who became quite famous as an agent. He's not an agent anymore, but Michael took me on, and he had a whole bunch of people at the time, like Hugh Grant and, Sean Bean, and, and these are people I knew. I knew Sean quite well from, running into them here and there. And so suddenly I was back in London, and I started working at places like the Royal Court, and we did quite a famous Bond season there with kind of Gary Oldman and with Danny Boyle directing, and that was quite.
Those were incredible times. There's lots of incredible times, but those specific at the Royal Court were very exciting times. Did you feel that when you were there, what you were doing was something special? Yes,
well, I think anybody who, certainly at that point, when Max Stafford Clark was there, Max was able to kind of give it a kind of focus, I think, that was very, very special and made you feel that you were involved in important work. And, of course, the Royal Court has gone on to, previous to that and after that, has always been turning up the really interesting plays. I remember meeting Adrian Dunbar there, for example. Did
you?
Yeah.
Wow.
And we'd meet Anne Devlin and all these really interesting women writers who had been just coming along at that period, and there were the actors were just great, and the plays were just great, and you're in the King's Road, and you really had a feeling. There really was that feeling that we were at the centre of something. You had Gary Oldman, Leslie Manville, Joanne Whalley, all on the same stage together.
God.
And it was extraordinary, and then the directors were so good. The likes of Max Stafford Clark and Danny Boyle, Simon Curtis was there. And the plays were extraordinary as well. So, to be with the English Theatre Company at that point was really, extraordinary. It was brilliant. And, you didn't have much money, and you weren't paid a hell of a lot, but it was all very fair and equitable, and then, on things went from there. You know, your career develops. You get a bit of telly, you do a bit of a series.
You're constantly learning from job to job.
Yeah, learning from job to job, learning from older actors all the time, learning to be still, learning to speak clearly, learning, you know, all that kind of, you know, basic stuff that you learn that's important. And so that's kind of basically how it all kind of, my career as such, unravelled and kind of off you went. And then, you know, you have your ups and downs in careers, you know, and things happen to you, and you know, you get married and children come along, you know, all those life then kind of comes into, you think, you know,
and priorities change,
and you know, you've got to earn money, and then, you know, or you get disillusioned. You know, there was a point in my 30s when I was doing a huge amount of TV that I just got kind of disillusioned with it, because it wasn't, you know, we didn't have a lot of channels. So, you know, you could be paid really well, and the product you were turning out, when a lot of us were looking at it, was, you know, it wasn't that great a lot of the time, you know. It wasn't...
Did you feel unfulfilled?
Yeah, well, I felt frustrated that, you know, we'd gather all these great people together, and the scripts, you know, when you compare them to the kind of golden age that we're in now of British TV drama, which is extraordinary, really, to be part of it. It's a bit of a privilege, really. You know, the standards were so much lower then, in many respects, you know. And they're excellent actors, you know, brilliant actors, trying to make the best of what was happening. But, you know, the standard wasn't as high. You know, what we were expecting out of a drama was so much lower, really, than... and TV was very ploddy, you know. It was very kind of, you know, the car pulls up, they get out of the car, they walk to the door, they knock the door's open, you see them inside. You know, there would be kind of seconds wasted of kind of precious screen time on the kind of, you know, trying to be, you know, not to be a movie, if you like, where we don't use that kind of language in films. You know, we hard cut in films. You know, we allow our audience to imagine, yet now they're inside. You didn't need to see them in the lift, you know. Whereas telly is kind of, at that point, was really kind of deliberate and kind of, So the language was different, you know, the actors were good, there was a lot more time to do things, and, you know, I kind of got disillusioned with that, because I trained, after all, to be in the theatre. You don't get trained to be on TV.
No.
There's a lot of these courses at the moment, spurious courses, I think, acting for television. There is only one kind of acting, and it's called acting for the theatre. And then beyond that, then, you turn the dial, and you start to learn how to do the other things, the camera work. Yeah. But, you know, you need to learn how to be honest, big first, you know, on a stage, using your voice, that, you know, using the full length of your body, you know, as a way of people understanding, you know, what it is you're feeling. And so that's what you're taught in drama school. And, you know, after you've kind of had, you know, you've had to kind of go in, and you're standing around to do 2 lines, and, you know, it's unfulfilling that you can't put a performance together. And of course, the live gig, I was used to the live gig. I was used to performing with a band. I was used to the live gig. Performance is where it's at. And in fact, it's the only thing that really interests us as audiences. We're not interested in the director's take on something. We're not interested in that. What we're interested in is an actor performing something that's really exciting, that draws us in and excites us. Yeah. So I was really interested in getting back to performance. So I kind of got a bit disillusioned with telly in my kind of mid-30s and was searching for another way of, you know, get back to the theatre, get back to the live gig. Jim Norton, you know, he said to me one time, he said, look, he said, any actor, you know, as an actor, you need to scare yourself at least once a year. You know, you need to actually get that adrenaline going, you know, get in the car, take it down a country road at 200 miles an hour, really, you know, put the fear of God into yourself, get out there, perform, get on the stage. That's what I trained for. 3 years of training to be able to kind of stand up, breathe deep and talk very loud for people to understand what you were saying. So I kind of tried to get back into the theatre at that point, and then I started looking at writing, and then I did a play actually for the Royal Court up in Liverpool, and I met a guy from Blackpool called, well, Lytham really, but Blackpool, I think they were originally lived in Blackpool, called Peter Chelsom. And Peter and I hit it off. He was very funny. He got that typical, Lancashire where all the great comic geniuses come from. He had all that stuff going down. So he and I hit it off. And then he came to me one day and said he had this, he'd been pushed to talk to the BBC, and he'd done a really interesting short with Stephen Tompkinson called Treacle. Really funny, bizarre, real Blackpool-centric, great short film. And he said, he asked me, did I ever hear a guy called Joseph Locke? Well, I did. Joseph Locke was a tenor. My father had bought his LPs and so forth, and we'd listened to them. And he was he'd been in Enniskillen during the war and all this kind of thing. I said, yeah, I know. So anyway, he said, would you like to... I don't know why he thought we could do this. I suppose because we had the same sense of humour, because you're going to work with somebody, you kind of need to have the same sense of humour, especially if you're going to write comedy.
Yeah.
So we sat down and we wrote this comedy called Hear My Song. It took us about, in our spare time, it took us about, 3 or 4 months.
Is that all?
Or, yeah, maybe a bit longer than that, actually.
Did you write together in the same room? Or?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I used to go and visit him. He had a nice place in Hampstead. I used to go up to Hampstead, and Pete and I would, go for a pint in the Flask, and then, or maybe we'd write and then go for a pint in the Flask. That's more like it. And so we got it together, and, it was at a time, it was an interesting time, because a lot of people, Channel 4 in particular, were doing a lot of issue movies. People were, there was movies about AIDS and movies about race and movies about really good movies.
Yeah.
But they had issues and nobody was really interested in comedy at the time. So I think we arrived at the right time with a comedy, and kind of mad comedy, and very quickly, we went to Limelight at that point, and we met this girl who's gone on to be a fabulous producer called Alison Owen. So that was Alison's first big gig, and suddenly this film was up and running. We found this incredible young actress called Tara Fitzgerald, who's just out of drama school, and this other young Northern Irish actor called Jimmy Nesbitt that Pete had seen at Drama Centre, and then we got David McCallum, who was a real hero of ours, and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. in the '60s, and then we unbelievably got Ned Beatty, and suddenly we're doing this film, and we went and we did it. We shot it in Ireland and a bit in Liverpool, and it was a huge success. It was picked up by Miramax, and it went to the States, and I think Ned got a Golden Globe. I'm not sure, maybe he didn't, but we were at the Golden Globes. I remember that, and so that was great. In the midst of all that, I started to write. Basically, that got me writing, and I'd been writing bits and pieces before. And so since then I've been writing. I've written a number of scripts, and sadly none of them have been done because it's really difficult. And what you realise after a while at the moment, that it's such a slog to try and get a low-budget film off the ground, that most people are forgetting about that now, and they're just heading straight into TV. Yeah. Because television's of such a high standard at the moment. You can, So to that extent, I've been writing. I've been writing with a TV series in mind, with Jed Mercurio, who'll exec produce. But I've produced a kind of a first episode of something, and I've got my fingers crossed that might come off, but I don't know yet.
Do you enjoy the writing process, Adi?
I do like writing, It's an interesting process is the word, I think. It's, just recently I worked with Conor McPherson. I did a play of his called The Night Alive, which was really, really fun to do. And And I asked Conor, I said, how do you write, Conor? You know, because I thought, you know, from writing Hear My Song, Pete and I, we got together and we did so much prep before we sat down. You know, we got the photographs, we got the music, we got all the kind of things that we thought were pertinent, you know, and we'd make notes, and we just, anything occurred to us, we'd put it down on cards for scenes. You know, things that, you know, you have in your head that you think might happen at some point in the film. So you put all those together before you actually sit down. And then we just followed the template, which is, you know, you write a 2-page treatment of what you think the story is. And then you expand that into a 24-page, more detailed synopsis of the whole thing. Sorry, that's the wrong way around. First of all, you do a 2-page synopsis, then you do a 24-page treatment.
Right.
And after 24-page treatment, then you write your 90 to 120-page script. So we had done all that. But I said to Conor, how do you work, Conor? And he says, I don't know. He said, I just sit down at the computer, he says, and I hear these people talking in my head, and I just start writing it down, which to me was just like crazy, you know. These people start talking in your head and you just start... And then, of course, I realised that, you know, stories are in there all the time. The stories are gestating in your head all the time. You're thinking about things all the time. And if you do just sit down, sometimes they just come out. And so if you have an idea in your head that, you know, a very simple idea that, you know, there's a guy and he's lost his wife and he's da-da-da and the kids are here and, you know... Those things, in the basic bones of a storyline that's in your head, sometimes if you sit down, you just start. Stuff comes out.
Yeah.
You know, it can work like that. And so just recently I started to just thought, right, you know, I'm not going to, you know, kill myself trying to absolutely cross the T's and dots the I's on this. I don't really know where it's going. Allow myself the freedom. And then I talk to other writers now, novelists, and apparently that's what they do they just head off.
Yeah.
They just set off on this journey in their head. And you know what? It's a much more exciting thing than kind of doing all the prep. But on the other hand, comedies are more difficult than anything else.
Absolutely.
You know, and not a lot of people would understand that. The mechanics of making people laugh is so fine. You know, you can... you know, it's a whole different ball game than anything.
Of course, everybody's taste for comedy is so different. You know, what my parents would laugh at, I certainly wouldn't laugh at. Or, you know, we all have different tastes of that. Whereas drama, people can go along for the ride.
Yeah, exactly. Drama, we kind of know, you know, yeah, exactly. You see, but we were writing a comedy. And I think we did it the right way. I think we realised that certain things and rules had to be adhered to if we were going to get it right. And as I say, the film was successful. People laughed at it, which was great. You know. But I do remember at one point when we were in Los Angeles, we were in the William Morris offices, and we had this big screening in Los Angeles, and everybody was coming. Gabriel was coming, and Liam was coming, and and there was a certain kind of movie executive who's there, whose name I won't mention. But we were looking to get me this person, get me that person. There's so and so coming, and I turned to him and said, "Look, don't you think we need to paper the house?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, what if all these people don't show up? We need to get some, we need to get some other people." And he said, "Yeah, okay." And he turned around to his assistant and said, "Gemma, get me 100 laughers." And it kept on talking, blah, blah, blah. And I said, "Excuse me, what did you say?" He says, "Get me 100 laughers." He said, you get, you pay them $25 and they come and laugh at your movie. What are you talking about? I went, "Oh, okay." And sure enough, the next day that we went to see the screening, there were 100 of the most morose-looking very old, mostly Jewish people queued up. And anyway, we came in, and there was a great moment where we were waiting, and Mickey Rooney actually came to this screening.
Did he?
And the whole everybody was waiting, and we was thinking, why are we waiting on the stage? We're waiting on something. We're waiting on Mickey Rooney. Mickey's got to get his soda and his popcorn. He's in the foyer. And eventually the doors open and down he comes right to the front row, sits in this corner front row seat and starts eating the popcorn and staring at the stage, And I'm thinking, God, this is bizarre, Anyway, Pete gets up and they ask Pete to say a word, and, Pete, we're all trying to be as worthy as possible, and trying not to let people know what a great time we're having, because that's what you kind of have to do when you've got low budget films. And you'll never win anything, but anyway, so we're all there, and Pete says something, and then I'm asked to say something, and Shirley Ann Field's there, who's lovely, Shirley Ann. And Shirley Ann, they asked Shirley to say something, and Shirley starts walking towards the mic, and as she walks, I can see that the microphone cable has just wrapped itself round the heel of her stiletto, and if she takes another step, she's going to pull the mic down, probably fall over. So I reach out and grab hold and said, Shirley, like this. And as I grab hold of her, Mickey Rooney jumps out of his seat and he goes, "Let her speak! Let her speak!" And we're all sitting there going, what the heck is going on, And anyway, so the show goes up, and and me and Pete are outside going, "God, this is really bizarre, isn't it?" and all the rest of it. And Shirley Ann comes out, and after about 15 minutes, and we go, "How's it going, Shirley?" She goes, "Really well." She goes, "But they're laughing in some very strange places." You can imagine it, titles. Ha, 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 ha. Anyway, anyway, we had a really fabulous time with Hear My Song. It was a real success, and still is. I was in Ireland recently, and I ran into a bunch of Americans, and they all kind of remember Hear My Song. It's kind of, it's shown, around St. Patrick's Day every year.
Yeah.
It's one of those kind of Irish films that people really took to their hearts, and it's great fun. So that was a wonderful period, doing all that stuff. Pete then went to Los Angeles, and and I didn't quite get Los Angeles. Like a lot of actors, I didn't quite get it, and like a lot of people, I didn't quite get it, because it's. It's only a great place to be if you're working there and you're working really hard, and it's great when you're working hard. But to be around, if you're in Los Angeles, as an actor, it's because you're not working, because basically everybody's working elsewhere. They're working in New Orleans, or they're working in Toronto, or they're working in Vancouver, or Seattle. So it's a pretty tough town in that respect, and I didn't really get it because. I didn't know whether there would be enough people there to sustain me, really, because, people were so interested in money, and there was no theatre there to speak of, and, it's a completely different ball game, I think. And anyway, I by that stage, I was married to Anna, and we had, a couple of kids. Ted was there. He was like 7 or 8, I think, maybe a bit older, actually. And then Madeline was about 2. And so, I came back to London and kind of picked up. And, and in that kind of way that happens in your career, you do something really amazing and then nothing happens. Most actors know this particular phenomenon. Yeah. Where you do something, you think, "Oh God, that's it," and then nothing happens. Yeah. And you sit around going, "Right, okay. Better kick on again then, better get on the case and
start back from the bottom rung of the ladder again.
Bottom rung of the ladder again, and because, the business makes suppositions about people. It's like when people used to go to the RSC or go into the West End for a long run, you could get lost for 3 or 4 years. People would just assume that I thought you were there, and actors get lost now and again, I think, and sometimes because of a success like that, But anyway, so that was good, and, that was a fabulous time. And, and then I got into directing for the theatre. I directed a lot in the theatre. I've directed, in particular, I've been interested in Samuel Beckett's work because he went to school in my hometown of Enniskillen, and we have a Beckett festival there most years. And so did Oscar Wilde, go to school there. So they were always kind of, you know, the bang of their kind of who they were was always in the background. And so, you know, and Brian Friel's work I've been, you know, working on for many years. And I really like Brian. He was a lovely man. And, you know, so there's been a huge amount of variety in you know what I've done, and then like, you know, out of the blue, as you know, recently that, you know, this series happened called Line of Duty, which is now about, I think, 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah. I was thinking the other day, God, how long have we known each other? And it is going back to that time. Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Yeah, it is crazy.
Because it started out as such a small little thing for us.
Yeah.
That we all invested in and all knew how incredible it was. But that small bunch of us that were there from day one.
I was looking through I was searching for some work that I've lost. I don't know I don't know how I did it. So I was looking through all my downloads and all my stuff the other day. And I came across this cast list of that particular period. And there were the names of, you know, everybody. Like, you know, Martin's character and Vicky's character and so forth. And then just said Superintendent Ted. You know, so he didn't actually have a name at that point. You know, he didn't know his name was going to be Hastings or anything like that. So it was like, in those early days, as you say, none of us knew really where it was going to go or what was going to happen with it. But, you know, we could tell it was good. And, you know, and there's a great bunch of people like you know, yourself and Neil and Vicky and Martin and Lenny James. You know, how brilliant was Lenny and you know, and Nigel. I mean, Nigel Morton. You know, Neil's character. You know, great characters and all the rest of it. So and, you know, and that was kind of coming full circle when you think of me and Neil going to that party.
I know, on
that Saturday night to get into drama school, and here we were together. You know. Many years later.
Many adventures later.
And doing Line of Duty. And of course we didn't know, I mean, it was only, as you know very well, probably about halfway through the second series that it really caught fire. And even episode 1 of the second series didn't get good numbers. And then suddenly halfway through, the numbers started going up. And it was touch and go whether we were going to get a second series in the first place. So thank God the BBC decided to, you know, to go with that.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was great that BBC Northern Ireland got behind it, Stephen Wright.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's been kind of one of those, for me, it's been an absolute, you know, game changer, godsend. You know, the sort of thing that you really, you would keep your fingers crossed that you would get. You know, because I'm 60 this year. So it's like kind of, you know, to get it at this stage of your career is such a gift, you know, a part like this.
I bet, because you've had such an interesting career doing loads of different things. And I was thinking about all the years that I've known you, and I remember thinking, Aidy's finishing the acting now, and I remember saying to him, what are you doing? Oh, well, I'm off to go and do the Brendan Behan thing, or I'm doing the Beckett Festival. You're always keeping yourself creative, you're always doing something.
Yeah, I think it's important for actors, like you know, you're doing this podcast now. I think it's very important for actors to stay in their creative head at all times. You know, you've got to keep, you know, being, no matter what you're doing, you know, I know actors who are really good at carpentry, for example, and will go or they're good at painting, but, you know, they'll do something that they can put their creativity into. You can't let your creativity lie around. You can't wait for the phone to ring thinking that somebody's going to... You've got to get either right, you've got to get up and perform, you've got to do... Somehow, if you can, I mean, I know that it's difficult, but if you can, you've got to explore other things that you can do. And, you know, it might be putting on a poetry reading somewhere, you know, because those things are wonderful, you know. People love those events. And at the moment, I've put together this incredible show. I think it's incredible, where I've taken T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, and I've broken it into 4 voices. And a friend of mine, Nick Roth, has written this new music. And I found the BFI recently put online the first ever colour footage of London in the 1920s, and it's absolutely extraordinary. Petticoat Lane, you know, the barges on the Thames, all that kind of thing. Very, very evocative, and just at the right time for the poem, when the poem was written. And I put all three things together, and it's really an extraordinary evening, you know. And art, after all, when you after a while you realise that art is simply being able to make the connection between things. That's all it is. Making the connection between colour and emotion, making the connection between, you know, words and emotion, and the, you know, the visual connections. If you can find three things that connect with one another, you know, and they may, you know, so it's not necessarily that you have to be original all the time. What's important that you can see how things slot into one another and complement one another and create a new whole, if you like. Three things that you thought were whole in themselves. You put the three of them together and suddenly, bang, something else happens, you know. And so I find that really exciting. And, you know, there's no dough in it. You know, but what there is there's a great sense of creativity and creating and camaraderie. And if you do manage to get these things together, there's a great sense of achievement. And I think people really love it. You know, people love seeing, you know, for example, in the Beckett Festival, I do a play, one of the few plays that he wrote, that he was asked to write, called Ohio Impromptu, which is a really incredible piece. And what we did with that was we get 48 people and put them on a boat in Enniskillen, and we'd take them down to an 11th century or 13th century monastery, ruined monastery. Yeah. And then we'd split them into two audiences of 24, and we'd bring them into this very small room, which we would have blacked off. And we have a screen that they look through, like, you know, confessional screen. Yeah. It's a piece of gauze. And then inside off a kind of, you know, 12-watt battery, I've got two LED lights that come up on these two guys that Beckett describes how they are, you know, and they both look like, I don't know whether you know who Edgar and Johnny Winter are. No. They're kind of a couple of albino blues guitarists. But these guys, it comes up and they look like two Amish guys. They're in black and they've got long white hair. And one of them is looking out towards us, and the other one is reading from a book, and he's reading like a memory. And now and again, as he's reading, the guy who is looking out taps his hand on the table like this. And the guy stops reading, and then he goes back a bit and starts again. When the guy goes like that, he starts again, but he goes back a little bit. And it's really bizarre what happens. It's really interesting, you know, and the story is essentially about a man whose wife dies, and he decides that's it. He's going to leave the place where he's been with her, and he's going to go somewhere else, and he's going to try and disassociate himself and have something new, but he realizes he can't escape his history, really. He just can't escape that. It's a very, very, you know...
I do remember you talking about this.
It's an amazing little piece. It's an amazing little piece. And, you know, and to have it on this island, it actually talks about being on an island. So to actually bring the people to the island and put them in there, and it's dark, you know, and the whole thing happens in front of them. It's an extraordinary experience. And the thing is that, you know, sometimes for this experience, only 20 people see it. And they know they're the only 20 people to see it.
Wow, so incredible for those 20.
Well, exactly. Instead of the kind of, you know, the amphitheatre experience, or you know, or you're going to see a band and there's 60,000 people there and you're 2 miles away. Yeah. Here you are right on top of something that's really intense. And you know that it's a singular experience, that, you know, that only 20 or 30 people are ever going to see this, and it's over. So it's really special in that respect. So I love doing things like that. So the variety is the thing, I think, at the minute for me, you know, and I'm really lucky to have this big anchor tenant, you know, called Line of Duty that I return to every year. And so, it, you know, it allows me then to, you know, take chunks of time off, because I'm not, you know, I'm also not a workaholic. You know, I do like time off. I like to travel. You know, my wife Anna's in Australia. Australian, so we do like to go to Australia if we can, every year, at least every other year, and visit her family out there and do trips from there. You know, go up the coast or go to Tasmania. Or, you know,
but that in a way is very healthy to stop work for a while. You know, to say no to this and to put your energies into something else for a while, so then you can return, you know, restored and rejuvenated to tackle whatever's next.
Yeah, absolutely.
AD, thanks so much for coming on, because it's an absolute privilege to spend time with you.
No worries, Craig. Brilliant. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much. You're welcome. Don't say I let you down on that one. That was a belter. And did you think, I know, you know, we don't really talk about jobs that much. Did you think that we weren't going to talk a little bit about Ted and about Line of Duty? We had to. We just had to. And I think it's really beautiful what AD said, you know, because he's been in this game for a long time. And he knows the ins and outs, and he's just a joy, an absolute joy to know as a friend, and an absolute joy to work with. And I hope that this episode was a joy for you. Too much joy? I don't think so. Never enough joy. Anyway, look, that's it. Let's keep it short and sweet this week, and I will see you next week. Until then, I've been Craig Parkinson. He's been producer Griff, and this has been the Two Shot Podcast. You take care, and I'll see you next week. The Two Shot Podcast is presented by me, Craig Parkinson, recorded and produced by Thomas Griffin for Splicing Block. Our brilliant music is courtesy of Then Thickens. Cheers.